Good evening, everyone. This is HeartTalk with Gran and Marion. As usual, we had a small little boo-boo in the early part, but every week we're learning something new. So, hi, Marion. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Granville?
Love the
So,
white.
welcome. Yes, in red and white to celebrate our National Day weekend. Very patriotic, the two of us. I even have the nails to match.
Hey, well, mine are still playing. Maybe next. Never know.
Yeah. Well, welcome everyone. We took a week's break, so we've missed you. We hope you've had a great week so far. Again, I'm Nicole Teo, and with me is Dr. Granville D'Souza. We are
Mhm.
the co-founders of EQ World, where we train and we coach leaders, executives, staff, individuals, couples, so many different levels of people, right, in areas of high performance using emotional intelligence or EQ in order to get breakthrough results.
That's right. So today's topic, I think it's a very interesting topic. We are moving away from the corporate domain or the corporate scene, and then we're going into the personal scene. This is the first time we are stepping away from the corporate scene. But I believe both of us, whenever we do train and our experiences are people tend to talk a lot about themselves. And I mean their personal experiences, especially the home experiences. Very often, people ask about their husbands, their wives, their children, and it can occupy sometimes a quarter of the workshop. So we thought, we cannot separate the two, right? We have to bring in the personal space into the corporate space. And
Corporate
today
space.
is our first session where we talk about this topic, coping with addictions and conditions.
Hmm.
So let me just say a little bit more about this topic. I think, first of all, we're going to have a very interesting guest, Cindy Tien. Of course,
Yes.
I can introduce Cindy shortly. Cindy is a wonderful friend of ours, and we've known her for quite a few years already, and she's going to share some great experiences about it. Um, all right, so talk about addictions and conditions. I know that seems like quite a huge topic, like conditions itself is huge, plus addictions that make
Mm-hmm.
it a lot larger. But I thought, let's talk about this because most of us would have had probably either this or that, right? Either a condition or an addiction. And of course, that could be a
Exactly.
generalization when I say almost all of us. But let's see. Let's test out with you and let's test out with me. Uh,
I always go first, don't I?
that's
I
right.
air my dirty laundry to this poor audience that our viewers. But again, I'm willing to share as long as it can help someone, learn something different or, if we can make that little difference. I think it's always important for us to also be able to share our journey.
And the good thing
Yeah.
I can test depends on what you share, then I'll share. That's
Ew.
okay.
Okay. In that case, then I must be more careful. All right. No, but again, I'm an open book, Gran. I have gone on the newspapers. I've written the book about some of the struggles that I went through. So a lot of people do know about it. But maybe I'll just quickly go through a little recap of the story of my life.
Is yours an addiction or is yours a
Well,
condition?
mine is really a condition. I would say in my mid 30s, again, remember I went through a divorce. At that point, my kids were young. I was struggling with the business that was growing. I was looking after my sickly parents, right? So I really did find that I was a little bit overstretched with my life, under a bit of stress, but still doing the best that I could do, with my charity work, with the community service, the business, the family, everything, right? But I think at some point I kind of forgot about myself. So turning 40 was how would I say, was a major stressful point for me. And I think a lot of people can share that somehow turning 40 can be quite a challenging time. So what happened was that I was getting sick all the time. I was losing a lot of weight, and then my hair started to drop out in clumps.
Mm.
Right, so that totally panicked me, especially for someone who has that image background and the, Miss Singapore background and all that. And so I started to see a lot of doctors, and after a number of tests, they really couldn't find what was wrong with me. They said that generally my health seemed to be good, so they couldn't really pin down what was wrong, and that kind of swung me into depression. Right, so I would say that condition. There's a name for it. It's called alopecia, right, where all my hair had dropped off. They said to me, maybe 5 years, 10 years from then, it could possibly be healed. But now, I'm in my 50s and it hasn't healed, right? So it is something that I have struggled with all these years. But I would say definitely I've learned to deal with it, to cope with it, and just take it in my stride. So
Right.
that's been the condition that I had. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll ask you afterwards, how did you cope with at least the aftermath of it, and especially now
Yeah.
you said you got in your 30s, and now you are okay. Now you're what, 35? So it's been 5 years.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. No, it hit me in the 40s, the early 40s.
Right, right,
Yeah. Okay, so now that I have shared, maybe
right,
you should share your condition or addiction. Which one is yours?
right. Let's not talk about addictions because there's tons of it. All right. So we will leave the addictions to Cindy, right? But let's talk
Okay,
about condition. So
okay,
you know, it's hard to say whether this was really a condition, but I believe it was. So I struggled in school. I struggled in school, in primary school, in secondary school. I would say a little bit of college. And the condition I would have thought, because I never went to a doctor to see, but again, anyway, in short, it's ADD, right? Attention deficit
okay.
disorder. So I wouldn't have thought it was serious, but I had major struggles focusing in class. And it will be this bad, right? I could be listening right in front, listening to perhaps a maths lesson. And within half a minute, my mind goes somewhere else. And then it comes back and then it goes away and it comes back and it goes away. And I used to think like, is everyone else going through the same? So I'll ask my classmates, hey, so how do you find the class? They said, oh, well, they won't tell me it's interesting. But I would grasp that people got what they were supposed to learn and I would not. And this is something I kept to myself, and obviously I tried to be normal as a kid, or even when you're 13 or 14, you try to be as normal as possible. And then you realize that everyone catches it. And I had to go back home and catch up as much as possible. But just a little bit more about this. I would then read the textbook, and it could be a paragraph, right? And within 10 seconds, nothing will go in. So I think,
Mm,
okay, maybe I just hate this topic. I'll try something else and I'll read another two sentences and nothing will go in. So that was a big struggle for me. But I'll talk about how I coped with it later on. And this really happened till about 20 something, right? Till the time I mean, the good thing is at least I made it. I was coasting, right? I
yeah.
never failed a year, but I was coasting along and I made it and I made it and I made it. And then I made it to college, I made it to uni. And I sometimes wonder when I look back, how did I do all these things? But I will later
Mm,
find out how I managed to cope. And then just move with it, and
yeah.
pretend as though it's no big deal. And so there came
Mm.
a point when I realized it's really no big deal. But I'll tell you about that later on after I find out how you cope with your.
Okay. But I mean, Gran, again, thanks for sharing that. And just thinking about something like ADD, I think in our days, we were just probably labeled as hyperactive, naughty, ill disciplined, rebellious children. And I think that label probably affected us pretty badly because now that you're sharing this, I do recall it was quite similar for me. But because my parents were teachers, it was never something that I wanted to share because I didn't want to embarrass them. So I think there was a little bit of shame that came with it. And nobody knew it as ADD then, right? They just, I mean, I don't know whether anyone ever told you that you were just rebellious and naughty and, you were a handful and probably got punished
Oh,
for that.
talk about the punishing that was constant. That to me,
Mm,
I never was offended or never took any
okay,
hatred to any teacher, because that was the caning and the slapping and the belting, that was normal for me. uh,
okay.
but where I think it was probably a little different for me was that it continued right into my 20s. And that's when I knew it
Mm,
was a condition, as opposed to, okay, being rebellious, not liking studies, loving to go to school. But the minute, the studies start or the lesson starts, like, oh my God, I'm just waiting for it to end because I just could not focus. But beyond
yeah.
that, it was also this distraction, starting things and not ending things,
Mm,
interest levels start and then they don't carry on into the longer term. And so many things started and never ended, and in many different forms. Let's not go there, but yeah,
yeah.
it took many different forms.
Yeah. And I
So
totally get that, and I think that's so important at the beginning is, understanding and accepting what it is,
yeah,
So, I mean, when you asked me earlier about what are the steps of coping, and now that you're sharing this, and I think that was at some point in our life when you recognize that whatever it is that you're having, there must be a certain form of acceptance. And I
mm,
would say for me, that was extremely hard, at that age at 40 and, having lost all my hair and everything else. There was so much anger within me. I was angry with the world. I was angry with, God. I was angry with people. I was just angry with myself. I was just so angry. It was so hard to get into acceptance. So I think that depression, my wake up call, having my younger son come to me and ask me about my faith in God and telling me that, Mom, you've always taught us that everything happens for a reason. So that wake up call was so important. So, the first thing was, for me, coping was acceptance, and that sounds like what you kind of went through
Yeah.
a little bit, in terms of at that age of 15, 20, or whichever age it was, right? And for me, another thing that I found extremely difficult was to ask for help. I was talking about from young, right? I didn't want my parents to go through this shame. I didn't want people to think that there was something wrong with me. So asking for help was a big challenge. I saw it as a form of weakness. So the fact that I was able to open up and ask for help because my boys kind of opened my eyes to it, I recognized that I had a beautiful, wonderful support system of my family and some very close friends. And that, by asking for help, they helped me to see the positives in my life, right? So that kind of gave me a little bit more confidence as time went on. And
Right.
then if I talk about another step that I took, well, for me, again, growing up in a family that is so important to do service for others, I decided that maybe I should go back to my charity work, because at least then I felt like I had some control. Because, losing your head, you can't control it. What's going on in your body, you couldn't control it. Whereas doing the charity work gave me a sense of, I don't know how to explain that, but it gave me a sense of control. And it
Yeah.
also helped me appreciate that other people were having it a lot worse than me. I would go to these homes and you see people who are so sick and they're dying, and there's so many other things that were going on, or these people who are so poor and they barely even have a meal to eat. And then I recognize, oh my goodness, I'm so blessed. So it's a few steps I had to take, right?
Yeah.
So a number of things had to go through. And at the end of the day, it's my faith, my faith that kept me grounded, my faith knowing that whatever was happening to me, well, it made me who I am today, and I can do the work that I do.
Yeah.
So that was my coping mechanism and journey. Yeah, in a
Great.
nutshell.
You being an extrovert, I think I'm just wondering, it's good to find out from those who are introverted, because you reached out.
Yeah,
You managed to reach out to certain, not just certain people. In your case, first of all, you had what we call a significant
families.
experience from your child. I mean, from
Yeah,
not Jared, but yeah, Jared, right? It was Jared.
Jared. Yeah,
Yeah, it was Jared. So Jared helped you to recognize something, and then obviously you reached out to other people within your family and your friends. So I'm wondering with others, and I think this is a good point for us at this point, maybe just to share with our viewers, just in case they are now listening, they're thinking, what's up with us? And maybe they just tune in and they don't know what the topic is. So
yeah.
the
It's like, oh
topic,
my
first of
goodness.
all,
Yeah.
to our viewers is coping with addictions and
It,
conditions. And we
yes.
also like to ask you, what is your way of coping or handling with either a condition or an addiction or a difficult situation? What have you done? What are you doing? What have you not been able to
Mm,
do? Just anything of these. Please just post something and let us know
yeah.
how you've been handling
Well,
it.
I definitely see some activity, Grant, but while it builds up, now that they will be able to answer some of the questions you just asked, maybe you share some of your coping mechanism.
Right.
I mean, because yours was a longer journey. I mean, mine really only started in my late 30s into my 40s, but of
Right.
course it built up from a lot of other. Yeah. So share, what was your journey?
So just going back to primary school. Primary school, I never even knew it was a condition. I just thought I was dumb.
Oh no.
Not
But
joking.
people didn't say that to you, right?
No,
Did they tell you?
but teachers will use all kinds of words, right?
That's
So
true.
and the thing is, lucky I chose to wipe it off and say whatever. I didn't choose to believe them. But I think by 13, 14, I realized it was no more about being dumb, because that's when I realized there's no one who's dumb. You don't come across people who are, okay, let's not even go there, right? Because there's certain labels where people believe they are. But it started to occur to me later on, and I realized, wow, this is something I've been struggling with. But when it came to exams, when it came to reading a book, can you imagine just reading a book to me after half a paragraph? I was like, oh my god, I need some kind of play. And so one wake up moment to me was this, when I would be doing my work. So can you imagine, when I'm 26 or 27, I'm doing my work, and then a bird comes to the balcony, and I'm like looking forward to checking out the bird. And I'm thinking, I'm always looking forward to something else. Either if it's a thunder, there's lightning, there's a phone call, my mother's calling me, or so I was always looking forward to something else other than something I need to focus on. And that's when I realized this has been happening for the longest time. Then did I realize there's a problem. But let me share with you how I whipped out of it. So one day, which could have been in my 30s, early 30s, somebody looked at me and said, "Yeah, Grant, how many times are you going to tell the same story? ADD, ADD, ADD." And then he said, "You are totally fine. You know, I've never, if you had not told me about this ADD thing, I would have never known you had a condition because you talk normally, you speak normally, you're training for heaven's sake." And then I realized, how many times have I been telling this sickening story and limiting myself by believing I've got a problem when actually it's not turned out to be a problem. I've managed to wipe it away from my life. And then I told myself, I'm going to stop using well,
Label.
let's say it. Yeah, it's a label. Sometimes I do tell it, but, you know, I've minimized it to by a great extent. And I realized, to me, of course, it was a gift, right? I now see it as a gift. Of course, when I was going through it, it's hard to see it as a gift, but I stopped using that story. But there's more to say. I'm wondering if anyone has said anything about if conditions or, because
All right, let me take a look.
and Cindy is going to come soon, but don't worry, Cindy, we are still going to chit chat a little bit before we bring you in. So just in
Okay.
case, yeah.
So let me see. So we've got Tahir from Bangladesh sending his greetings.
Hi,
Mark has
Tahir.
written hyperactive.
Yeah.
I guess that is, yeah. Again, you know, when we talk about conditions, it's just kind of cute because the first thing is the acceptance or the awareness about it, right? Like when you asked me, you said, Marion, you have no condition. So what you just said about not using that label, I've also recognized that. Okay, so Mark here says, so accurate, Marion. Not so sure what he's referring to, but hopefully about acceptance.
Yeah.
Original choice of coping was to just push it down and not deal with it, which is so true. Again, you know, we all go through that, and it's the acceptance is not easy. Totally not easy. Yeah,
that's true. I've got another thing which I also did, and that happened at 27. So one way I thought I could really help myself was to get into, you know, I couldn't read much then. I just didn't like reading because I would just lose interest.
Really? Oh my goodness, you're such a bookworm now.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's funny how when you believe that it's no more a problem, suddenly you whip out of it. So I used to listen to a lot of audio. And last time it was cassette tapes, right?
Yes.
So I used to rent Tony Robbins cassettes, 32 of them. And I used to realize I can just close my eyes and let it go, let it roll. And I do believe, obviously, the scripts and the solutions and all the different things that he said from his work, and obviously not just Tony Robbins, right? Many of the different things that were said by all these different gurus has definitely seeped in, which has then made our work richer as well, right? Between what you do and what we do, I think we managed to put together a lot of things based on what we've both done in the past. So, any other coping mechanisms you've had? I mean, you've shared something which obviously is been very challenging thing dealt with over your lifetime. And it's something that you're still coping with, but looks like you are quite okay with
I mean, I would say to a certain extent, there are days where I get the struggle where, you know, I look at myself in the mirror and I actually hate myself, but then I have to recognize all the gifts that I have been blessed with. And I also have to think about the good that I can do with this condition, right? And, you know, I joke about it with the girlfriends and I say, you know, you girls talk about a bad hair day. I just have to flick on whichever style I want, long hair, short hair, blonde hair, brown hair, black hair, and I can just, you know, so I have to focus on the gifts. Otherwise, you know, it's difficult. It's not easy. So that's where the acceptance, I can say I've accepted it, but yet I haven't accepted it. I would say I've let it go, but yet I haven't let go. So, you know, it's a work in progress. But the fact is, I need to keep going out. And why, you know, like you joked about this with me, like Marion, you know, why do you stretch yourself and go and do this Rotary work or charity work at church and all that? But when I keep myself busy with something that is purposeful, something that I'm passionate about, it's not about a distraction anymore or hiding it, but just so that I can have a greater, deeper appreciation for life. And it's not about how I look anymore. You know, I've had to let that go, that I am who I am and I have to love who I am. So it's been a journey. Yeah.
And this thing about acceptance, you know, I think sometimes a lot of people say, you know, work towards it and try to get acceptance. I think the challenge is, how do you get acceptance? You know, sometimes people have got a mental strategy about how they do it, and it only happens after they've gained acceptance. And yet many people, because of personality, we can always talk about Enneagram and bring it, but we won't do that now.
That's true.
Some people get acceptance fast and then they can wipe it off from their system, and others can hold on to it and hoard and keep and store and use that as their coping mechanism, because then it becomes like an identity. So again, personality comes into play. At the same time, a lot of us find a certain way, and in the end, we can use it for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
So let's see.
I think the most important thing is, as long as you're not suppressing it and acting like nothing is wrong, because, we've met people who we've coached, right? When they wear this mask and they don't feel good about it, or they don't even recognize it's a mask anymore, that they think that, well, that's who I am, that's who I want the world to see. But then at some point they go back home and they feel like crap. And then the anger comes out back home on their family members, or it comes out on their loved ones, right? And I think this is something that why EQ has been so important for me in my journey. And I believe that's why you also do the work that you do, is we want to be able to help people transform from within.
That's right. And would you believe it is 8:21?
Yes.
So we have to
okay.
Bring in our guest.
While you are letting Cindy in, let me just quickly share if there's more. Okay, so Meng Kiang has joined us. Sylvia has joined us. Hi. Okay. Yeah, so Sylvia actually asked more about how did you overcome ADD?
Okay.
Right.
Okay, Cindy is waiting.
Maybe you'll have to go into it a little bit. Yeah, no problem. Then Mark said, need healthy steps for coping with anger and limiting beliefs. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, good point, Mark.
So thanks, Sylvia, for asking. I will definitely address that afterwards, because Cindy is waiting in the room. And
hi,
Marion.
Hi. Nice
hey, Cindy.
Hi. So good to see you guys.
Thanks so much for joining us. And we are privileged to have you here, especially talk about something which is obviously can be sensitive to share. And yet three of us, at least the two of us, have tried to be vulnerable. And yet I know you're going to do the same, because we brought in Cindy for this session because I think Cindy has shared this in our workshops, and we were very moved by her willingness to share what she did. And, when we spoke to her prior to this session, she was willing to also share the same. So thanks so much for doing that.
Yes.
So
thank you so much for coming and joining us, Cindy.
Most happy to. I've always enjoyed being with you guys, so very happy to share.
Thank you.
All right. So again, just for our viewers, Cindy is also a speaker, trainer, and coach. And she does areas like personal branding, emotional and social intelligence, helping people build their self-esteem, as well as their confidence from within. So, I met Cindy by chance at one of our programs, even before we came into EQ World, right? And it was an interesting encounter. Then as we got to know each other, we have very similar hobbies and interests and ways of thinking. So I'm really proud, in the journey that you have gone through, Cindy. And I think I believe our viewers will definitely gain a lot from this sharing. Yeah. Right. So let's go into it.
So Cindy,
sure.
Just remind our viewers what they're listening into, and just in case you bring up something and they're wondering, what's this all about? So again, the topic is coping with addictions and conditions. And in your case, Cindy, are you going to share with us a condition or an addiction? And when you do, just let us know also, how did you recognize what you were going through before you went through this, either addiction or condition? So yeah, you can say at any point, what is it? And was there a trigger, right? Was there a trigger? Yeah.
It's very interesting to talk about this, because I felt like addiction has been such a big part of my life. And I guess it started when I was a child. I was quite a troubled teen, I must say that. My parents had a big headache with me. And I think the first time my father found cigarettes in my bag, I was 11 years old. So it was traumatizing for my daddy. And I feel for him, beloved daddy, and this little girl, this innocent little girl, right? And then you find cigarettes in the bag. So I think that was the very first addiction in my life, which was to cigarettes. And as I grew a little older, it kind of went into alcoholism. I left school, and I was a bit of a wild child. Like I said, I struggled with a lot of issues internally, and I had boyfriends that drank a lot. And because I had those boyfriends, and I was also quite a raging party girl, I started drinking as well. And initially, it was like, 1-2 drinks just to relax and have fun and party. But it got really bad, because after a while, when you go and catch up with friends, right? And after a horrible day of drinking, the next day we just want to meet, eat dinner, catch up, and then go home, I realized that I still wanted to drink. So nobody wanted to drink anymore, but I just want to keep getting drunk on my own. And then from 1 to 2 glasses, it started increasing. And then after that, it became so bad that, when I realized that when I didn't drink, I couldn't sleep.
Wow.
So it went into sleeping issues, and it didn't help because I was a cabin crew with an airline at that time. So my body clock was confused, right, with the different hours of the day and, being in different countries all the time. So sleeping was very badly affected. So I was drinking not to relax anymore, but I was drinking to knock myself out.
So,
Yeah.
Cindy, that's interesting. First of all, so you say cabin crew, then would this have happened in your late teens or early 20s kind of thing?
I joined the airline when I was 19 years old. So a lot of my struggles happened when I was teenage years, but it got really bad from my late teens onwards, all the way till when I was in my 20s.
Wow. And was there like a trigger, or were you just liked that feeling? That feeling made you want to take more? Was there a trigger that made you feel I need to cope with this problem and that's why I'm taking more?
So it's very interesting. I think for me, it's both, because I'm also quite a playful person, like you and Marion. We like to have our fun, right? We like our drinks. So initially, it was just wanting to have fun. But after that, it became like a way of escaping stress and a way of escaping problems. So whenever I cannot handle a certain emotion I feel, so, I have a bit of self-esteem issues. So whenever I feel like I'm not enough, the quickest way for me to kind of forget how I'm feeling is to go into alcohol. Yeah. And it became like autopilot. Like I didn't even think very much, right? If I'm not feeling good, okay, let's go and have a glass of wine. Let's go and have a bottle of whiskey. And it became like a repeated pattern. And I just kept doing it over and over again.
Yeah. And it feels like something that I think a lot of people probably can connect to, because, a lot of people don't really want to talk about their emotions. Nobody wants to go into the painful experiences or the difficult past. So we suppress them and we do something that makes us happy. And when you're in a work environment or in a social environment that smoking and drinking and clubbing is something that's common, you just do it to fit in with everybody else. And nobody really thinks about, is this an addiction? Until you start to recognize it. So
yes, totally. So so I realized that people were not drinking anymore on non-drinking days, but I was still drinking. And I remember there was this flight that I did, and it was a flight to New Zealand, and we had 4 nights there. And the moment I touched down, and it was Christchurch, the first thing I wanted to do was to go to the supermarket, and I bought 4 bottles of wine straight away because I know I had 4 nights there. Whoa. So that was how crazy it became. And after a while, even drinking didn't help me to sleep. So I had to chase that with sleeping pills. So I took a lot of like sedative drugs, like if you've ever heard of those like ecstasy pills, and then those like Dormicum, and so I had to chase that even with things like cough mixture, right? Anything that can put me to sleep, knock me out, I would take them. And the worst part was that the doses got higher and higher and higher, that it didn't help. So I wasn't able to sleep. Can you imagine being high and not being able to sleep? That's horrible, And then the next day, that you've got to go to work. And when you're high and you can't sleep, it makes you feel even more stressed up. And then that triggered me to take even higher doses of, those substances. Yeah.
Cindy, wow. Even though you told us some of your story, I mean, now I'm really hearing more than what you actually told in class. And thanks for doing that, for all our guests who are listening as well. So when you were going through this, did people know that you were doing this, or do you say, hey, cheers, and then but then you keep it yourself, or whether you knew it was a problem, or did that really occur to you much later?
I think initially I was in denial. I think the only person that really knew about this at that time was my boyfriend. And we were drinking together a lot, but obviously he didn't have a problem as big as mine, I think, because he was able to stop drinking, but I couldn't. So I didn't see it very much as, I thought I was just being playful. I didn't feel that I recognized it as a problem.
Yeah.
Until it got so bad that at one point, I took 8 pills a night, 8 sleeping pills a night, and I knocked out for, I think, 18 hours. And when I woke up, I didn't know which part of the world I was. And yet I was able to kind of put on my uniform and work back home to Singapore. So I didn't realize that it was a problem until it became really bad. My boyfriend
So there
started,
was a
fighting
turning
with
point.
me.
Yeah.
There was a turning point. There was a turning point. So, yeah, coming to the turning point, I think, Marion, I went through a similar episode like you, where my body started to break down and my hair started to fall out. So it was really scary. And at that time, again, there were so many issues that came together with this because I was dieting as well. So it's constantly on a diet. I was trying to be skinny. So it's a combination of all these factors. So I remember there was this flight that I did from Los Angeles to Taipei. So after flight, I went for a shower and I washed my hair. And then after the hair wash, my hair started falling out in like big bunches like that. Crazy scary. It felt like a horror movie. I called my mom and screamed so loudly on the phone to her. And that's, I think, the first time that my mom actually found out about my problem. So it kind of went into a very bad state before I actually opened my mouth to admit that I have a problem.
Yeah. Usually it needs something dramatic like that because, denial, you don't know that you're in denial. Now we can
Yeah.
look back at it, and I think that's why we also connected on so many levels because of the lifestyles and the environment that we were in. So, sometimes but I don't know whether it's sometimes like we blame it on the society or we blame it and we think that it's okay for everyone to go in. But basically what we were doing, or like in my case, is just not facing up to my demons. Yeah. So how did you cope? So, how did you cope? Like after your mom found out, and what did you do?
And the interesting thing is, after my mom found out, that was really not the last of it, right? So the good thing is I got better from my hair loss actually got better. My mom is quite a fervent volunteer leader in church. So like you, Marion, a lot of my recovery is really through my faith journey. It's very miraculous. My mom brought me to church, prayed for me. And the interesting thing is, like, for the first time in like a year, I could sleep, without alcohol, without pills. So my sleeping recovered and it got better. And then after that, I left the airline. And because I had been abusing my body so badly with all these substances, I had problems then with walking. So I started to have pain in my legs. And I went to see a doctor and went through a couple of scans. Then they found out that I had this degenerative hip joint disease. So because of the alcoholism, the hip joint had totally died because of a loss of blood flow. And the doctor said that I have a hip joint of a 90-year-old woman. So I dealt with my problem for the hair loss and the sleeping. And then now I had another problem, which is this degenerative bone disease. And at the time I was only in my 20s. Yeah. So the coping, again, I think for me, I went through a period of extreme pain before I decided that I would go for a total hip joint replacement. But I think what happened for me was really like a very much spiritual inward transformation about, what you guys mentioned earlier, accepting that I have a problem and kind of surrendering that, I can't help myself. My back is against the wall. And God, you've got to help me. So I must say that a lot of it came from support from family and friends. Because, we alone, it's just no way we can get out of something like that by ourselves. So to ask for help, and I'm grateful that I have that help from family.
And the great thing, Cindy, that happened was, when I say the great thing, of course, this was a really challenging period for you, which lasted quite some time. The good thing, I think, in it was that you managed to talk to your mom about it. I'm just wondering if your mom did not get to know about it. Would you have actually, it's hard to say if you would have reached out because a lot of things was happening to you. And in a way, it was giving you stimulation and ecstasy. You were in ecstasy. And so sometimes when we're in it, it's very hard to say, I need help because you're enjoying it. You're in the moment. And yet, of course, there's this other part of you that's affecting your head, your body, and so forth. But that happened, right? And so when you reached out to your mom and then obviously she brought you to church, was it easier then to like what you're doing now? Did you find that it was healing to talk about it and to let people know what's it like?
Yeah, totally. And I think that even the process of telling my mom about it was a huge relief because it's like something that you struggled with. And I think for me, there was a lot of shame. Because I felt like, everything that has happened is because you did this to yourself. Huh? Nobody to blame except for yourself. You yourself, you were the one who wanted to have fun. You were the one who went all crazy with all this alcoholic stuff. So I think there was a lot of shame. And I kind of held back because I didn't know how they would react. And the last thing you want to hear from somebody when you're telling them their problem is "I told you so," right? Because our friends
And
and
it's an
family kind of
Asian
know that.
parent, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't
Yeah,
want them to
sometimes
be
the Asian
chiding you,
parents, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Because
yeah,
they show love in different ways, and that seems to be the standard answer, right? I told you so. But
yeah, yeah.
we want that independence. So, it's difficult, asking for help, asking for, to allow yourself to let people know the struggles that you're going through. Yeah, I totally relate to all of that.
And
Mm.
yeah, so that wasn't easy, and I must say you reached out and you got the help.
Yeah.
Now, did it stop, or it gradually? You can still enjoy your drinks. Let's not get into the ecstasy
Yeah.
part.
So what's the now like? I mean, the
Mm.
journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. I must say that the transformation is definitely not overnight. It's a journey, right? I mean, to be honest, if you
Yeah.
ask me whether I'm tempted now to get high, playful people, yes, let's get high. But
Yeah.
but no, because I think you just kind of grown out of it, and you know that you've got a responsibility to. A lot of us are trainers, and then we coach as well. We've got a responsibility to people, and you know better now. And I think the realization was came when I realized that the times when I wanted to get high are those times where I couldn't handle myself. I couldn't
Mm.
handle either being too excited.
Mm.
It's either I'm overly happy, I want to drink, or I'm overly frustrated and I still want to drink. So
Right.
it was at the opposite ends that kind of triggered me to want to go into these kinds of things. So I think it's a lot better now because after going through this period of transformation, you become a lot more aware of yourself and your triggers.
Of
Mm.
course, yeah.
So being
But
aware of that helps you to get over it a little bit
oh yes,
easier.
of course. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, you talked about self-esteem, and maybe this is from us talking as women also. A lot of women struggle with that because number one, they want to look a certain way, so they try to keep slim. Some of them diet like crazy. They start smoking. Their meals are minuscule, and then yet when things like that happen to them, like for me losing the hair, for you too, and then not being able to walk, or so that self-esteem is something that not just women, but a lot of people, right, men and women, struggle with this self-esteem issue. So what would you say was the one thing that you had to do in order to build that self-esteem for yourself? Do
Mm.
you recall?
Yes, I think a lot of it for me was the self-talk. It was definitely
Mm.
that because usually I get triggered when my mind is filled with a lot of negative thoughts, right? So Marion, you probably feel the same way as me. We berate ourselves a lot, and for me, I felt that I appeared to be very confident on the outside. And if you ask my friends, they would always say that Cindy is very confident, but actually that's not true. It was all an act. My self-esteem is as big as this. So I had very low self-esteem, and it was always how I coped was really being very intentional about what I put in my mind. Because when I was younger, it used to be like heavy metal, right? And then you listen to all those lyrics, and they're asking you to go and drink, and they're asking you to curse your life, and they're telling you how much your life stinks. And when it kind of goes into you, it goes into your subconscious mind.
That's
And
right.
it kind
All
of
that
pattern
programming.
you to go and think about that. But I had to kind of repattern myself and to
Yeah.
fill my mind with healthy thoughts. And for me, that
Absolutely.
came from the perspective of faith, right? So we have different religions and they share with us different things. So I started kind of meditating more on what the Bible says I am. Like my identity comes from my creator and not just how I look externally,
Yeah.
not whether people validate me or not. So I think the intention to not just leave it to chance, but to say, okay, I wake up every morning, what am I going to feed my mind with?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that really, really helps for me. It sounds simple, and yet a lot of
Yeah.
people don't do it intentionally on a daily
Of
basis.
course, yeah.
Right. You know,
Gran must be feeling a bit of a deja vu. Like, did I not hear this story earlier 20 minutes ago?
right.
That's why I said Cindy and I have a very similar journey. Yeah, sorry, you're going to ask a question, Gran?
Yeah, this might be it's never easy to ask someone. Of course, first of all, when you can't turn back the clock, but at the same time, just looking back, and it's hard to also say this, but let's see what you have to say. Can you extract the gift from the chaos and the challenge and the adversity that you had before. Because you know why? I know there could be a lot of listeners who, one, they could be listening and they could be having some secret addictions. The other one is they could have some friends who are obviously going through similar challenges. And some of them, they could be having kids, right? Some of our listeners have kids, and especially at that teen age, right? You also started a lot of stuff at 19. Now, what I know there are quite a few layers of advice, questions down here. One is, if you could turn back the clock, what is something you might have, what could you have done if you could have done something differently? And the other one could be, what's the gift you've extracted from the past? So just two things there.
What I would have done differently, I guess I would have sought help. So I'm not sure whether it's because of a pride or ego thing, or whether we are in denial. I think it's a combination of all of it. You know, we just didn't want to recognize that we have a problem. So I think definitely seeking help earlier before it went into that state, because I'm also quite an extreme person. I didn't realize that it was such a big problem until my body started breaking down. So if you're somebody going through a secret addiction and you are hearing this now and you're realizing that, you know, you have this secret repetitive behaviors, I think you should start talking to somebody about it. Could be a good friend. You don't have to get professional help, but talk to somebody and get to hear somebody's thoughts. You know, how do they feel about this thing that you're repeating over and over again? It could even be as simple as shopping, right? Online shopping. How addictive is that? My God.
That's right.
Yeah, not it's the sweet things, the sugars and the cakes, and then Coca-Cola and everything else that goes. Yeah,
I think like sugar and cake and Coca-Cola, that's probably something more difficult, because again, when you have Coke, maybe we won't tell our friends, hey, by the way, I love Coke. So that could be secret stuff. Which
but the sugar gives you that high in its own way, right? So it's hard. So there's so many kinds of addictions, but a lot of people don't see it as an addiction. They'll just say that, you know, it's a pastime for me. I enjoy shopping. It releases stress. And, you know, in our resilience program, in our EQ program, we talk about stress busters. And, you know, if shopping helps distract you, or cooking or eating, it's just we need to recognize there's such a, you know, moderation or doing it in excess. You know, but I think that's where the awareness needs to be there. And I agree, you know, being able to ask for help is something that if you can do that, but I think they have to find that courage to first allow themselves or give themselves permission to say that it's okay. I'm not a failure. You know, I'm just having a bit of a challenge now and I need some help. So that's
good point, because, you know, sometimes it can be small things like you said, whether it's sugars, whether it's cakes, whether it is sweets. And if it does stretch into other things, like, for example, when you talked about drinks or maybe even gambling, of course, gambling is another big challenge, right? And so just talking about that thing about reaching out to someone else and how that can help. You know, people might be asking, so what if I reach out to a few people and they just say, oh, interesting, and they don't say anything? And that's where we could lose faith in terms of wanting to share. But what it could also do is for other people to give 1 or 2 points of view here and there, not to be judgmental. But imagine if you finally find the right person who says the right thing, who can lead you to the right person. You never know, right? So I do think, reaching out to others is extremely important. The challenge is, what if people are extremely uncomfortable? But we won't know. Right? You know, I'm glad you shared that strategy. And is there anything else besides that, Cindy?
You know, actually, you know, these days there are a lot of anonymous hotlines that we can call. And if you are very uncomfortable talking to a friend, I think it's perfectly fine to pick up the phone and call a hotline. Exactly. So this person is stranger. They don't know you. They're not going to judge you. And even if they judge you, that's fine, because they don't know who the hell you are. So tell somebody, find out a little bit more about this. Because I think what happens is people don't realize how serious it gets until it becomes really serious. So they might start, you know, spending so much money that it's burning a hole in their credit card. Or they might get into, you know, I know of people who get addicted to like pornography, and when they're stressed out, they go into
addiction is a big thing.
So these things,
all kinds.
There are different addictions, but you kind of know that when you repeat them regularly, it doesn't lead you to anything that's healthy and nourishing for your life. Right, and it messes with your mind. And the worst thing I think is that when you get into addiction, after a while you feel condemned. You kind of feel like it's my own fault. And the more you feel that way, the more it will hold you back from telling people. And it's going to be difficult, but I still think we should definitely do that. Like, don't go through it alone. The truth is that we on our own, we are just not strong enough.
And I guess the challenge, especially nowadays, is the access to these things. Like, for example, there's online gambling, right? Before you had to, before maybe you had to you find 4 friends.
Easily available. Yeah, very easily available. Yeah.
What about porn, right? Just get to you just have to, I think within, not from experience, but just go on Google, right? Go on Google one word and you have full access, right?
Yeah.
So the challenge is, even acknowledging or recognizing that this is a problem is really the first step.
Right? Yes.
Awareness is key. But again, a lot of people, the denial is so strong. And there's so many times the same thing that, eventually it will go away. If I sweep it under the carpet, maybe it'll disappear and people will forget about it and I will forget about it. So there's so much denial, right? And if you talk about the how the after effect of it, of the repercussions of whatever you choose, I think sometimes people they choose not to see it until something dramatic happens to them. Or even if something dramatic does happen, sometimes they kind of get back into, and exactly what you said, it's that mindset that I deserve it. So I'll just, I was bad, I did the wrong thing, so I'm the victim here and I just take whatever crap that comes into my life. So they give up on themselves. And that's where it's so important to give themselves permission to sit with that pain that they're going through and know that, yes, the change is going to be challenging. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take time. But when you have a good support system, and that's where I always say that I was very blessed that I had a great support system, right? Because on your own, it is so challenging. Yeah, so I totally agree with what you said, Cindy.
Yes.
So Cindy, about the midpoint as well. So talk about finding your way. I always find that the midpoint is probably a challenging moment. You know what I mean? Like, for example, the point where, first of all, you're enjoying it and then you're struggling with it. And then you find this midpoint where somebody is coming to your life to be the savior. But yet you are midway between being in that part and then this part of recovery. How do people find momentum to push themselves further to get on the upper side of recovery? Like, how did you do it?
For me, the I would say that the consequences were too huge for me to say that I want to continue going that way, because the doctor did tell me that you should not drink anymore. Yeah, because he said that the degeneration was really due to that. So I think the pain was so bad that it scared me to wits. I felt that I didn't want to go there anymore. But we are all tempted to have different things, right? I mean, I still want to have a glass of wine here and there, but I think it's really if for people that you've got close friends and all that, let your family members know if you feel that you might be having a bit of a relapse, and being very aware of what are some emotions you feel, like backtracking it a little bit. Yeah. So why did I do this? And thinking back, like, before I did this, what were some of the feelings I got that made me want to do this? So I find that sometimes, even when I'm tired, like I've had a very long day at work and I come home, sometimes I'm very tempted to, hey, maybe I should go and have a beer. So kind of being aware that that trigger will lead you to the behavior. So when you're aware of that trigger, it helps you to manage it a little bit better. Yeah, so I think the midpoint is also letting your family members and your loved ones know that, hey, I'm struggling with this and I need your support. And there will be moments where I might have one or two relapse, and I'll need you to believe in me and give me positive affirmations and not put me down. Because the more we put someone down, the more they feel condemned, the more they want to go and repeat that behavior.
They give up on themselves too.
Yes, that's right.
That's amazing advice, Cindy. Now, as usual, all good things have to come to an end. Time has just buzzed by so quickly. We need to answer some of our comments from our viewers as well as wrap up. So that's been amazing, Cindy. Thank you so much for, being vulnerable and sharing, some part of your journey, but it's definitely very useful.
Yeah, man.
Most welcome.
You've been so vulnerable to share even more things from class. I mean, of course, class, sometimes we don't give people a long platform, but this was half hour of you sharing some things which are really valuable for us to listen to. And we wish we had another 15 more minutes at least just to hear what else has happened. But, always we can bring you back.
Yes, yes. I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to talk about this. Thank you for having me, guys. Lovely being on your
Thanks,
show.
Be with
Cindy.
us.
All right. Have a
Enjoy the
nice
rest of
long
your
weekend.
session.
Okay.
See you.
You
Bye.
too.
Thanks. Thanks,
Bye.
dear.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.
Wow. That was really good. Very nice sharing.
Thank
Okay, so Grant, let's just take a look at some of the comments here because you still owe a little bit about your ADD
That's
and
right.
maybe
That's right. I'm ready,
yeah.
Sylvia. But shall I talk about that, or you
Okay.
wanna?
Okay, just very quickly. So Maggie just mentions that she loved turning 40 UK. Definitely, even 50. I love turning 50. Self-confidence, grew so many things happening that are positive. So thanks, Maggie. Let's see, who else do we have who has commented? Debbie is here. Ian is here.
Hi, Debbie.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So the challenges for many people, okay, so Meng Kiang, sorry, let me just read what's that. The challenges for many people depending on things or someone hold them back. How do we do better every day? Yeah, so I think it's a lot about the mindset and what you're saying to yourself.
So for me,
John is here, thanks. Yeah,
John,
Ian.
is John?
John Chua.
Oh, John Chua. Hello, John.
Yeah,
Right.
Right.
Right. So for Meng Kiang, if you are there and you can give us a kind of example, because Meng Kiang is from Cambodia and he's in insurance, and I guess for him it would be about sales, and sales people need motivation, and sometimes things could pull them back from certain experiences where there's rejection and so forth. But hopefully you could give an example maybe for even next week. Right.
Yeah. Again, because Cindy's and my journey is so similar, you share about your ADD because it's so common, and I think a lot of parents who might be listening would love to help their kids with this.
Okay. So, my so-called recovery is very unique, and I'm wondering whether, Sylvia, if you know someone, whether this can be applied, but I think in some way it could. So one day I went for a course. So, like I said just now, my way of finding answers was going for courses. Initially, I hated reading because when I start reading, boom, I'll fall asleep or I'll just get bored. So I went for courses to experience because I love the experiences. And so one day I was telling the same story, I've got ADD, that's why, the same old rubbish. And the instructor, who's really a very, very strong woman, she said, come up here. She went like, come up here. And I was like, oh no, I hated to be the center of attention, even though I was in training, and quite frequently we are, right? And so she said, tell me a story again. So as I was about to share the story, she pushed my chest and she said, stop it, right? And she says, share with me something about your life. And then, so I started sharing with her something about my life, and she saw my eyes moving upwards. And she said, no, I said, I want you to use your heart. And in my head or heart, I said, how do you know whether I'm using my head or heart? Right? Of course, I did not say that loudly, but my eyes went up again. And again, if you study NLP, you know that the eyes, when they're accessing, right, and when it goes on top, it's getting to memories, right, going to your head. And she looked at me, she said, no, I said your heart. And then I asked her, I said, what's the difference? I said, I'm giving you an answer. She says, there's a difference between your head and your heart. And she said, your heart knows one answer, and you don't have to think too hard when you express things from your heart. And so she said, close your eyes and take your hands and touch your chest and give me the answer from there. And immediately I just told her whatever I needed to say without having to think. And she said, that was your heart. And then I looked up and I said, oh my God, that was not difficult. And yet I really allowed myself to share what I truly meant. And so from that experience, I realized that I did not have to try and recall everything I did. I did not have to recall things from books, but I could speak from my heart. I could speak from my experience, and I could connect things from the outside world into my world and express it the way I felt. And so I was no more pressured to recall what I got from this book or recall this and, use my head. But the combination of head and heart helped me to move away from this thing that I got a problem with remembering things. So I don't know, Sylvia, sometimes when I share this story, I always hope people will realize that the problem is now, the challenge is this: our schools don't help. When maybe now it's a bit better, but because of the rote learning, the memory and the exams, we trained our heads so well that we've divorced our heads from our hearts. So if only we've got an opportunity to practice both and fuse the two, I think it will heal many people.
And I think that's something that as parents or even as siblings, or even if you're talking to people who are not connecting with the heart, have more conversations, notice changes in their face. If you see that it looks like they're feeling upset or there's a emotional, there's something that's affected them, just ask them, what are you feeling? I think many times we forget to connect with one another on a level of our feelings, like especially if it's unpleasant feelings. So just like, what are you feeling? Why are you feeling like that? And explore that. I think this is something that we don't do enough of. And it's not just here in Singapore. I think it's quite worldwide, being able to have that conversation. And that is something I also had to learn from my boys. My boys both being very church-going kids also. That's why I always feel like their EQ is good because they were teaching me at some point. And I think that's why you and I do what we do, because we really definitely see the demand for people to get in touch, not just using your head, but get in touch with what is your heart saying to you. Because at the end of the day, it's going to affect your body in terms of your health, as we saw with Cindy, as we saw with myself, as well as for you, right? They manifest in different ways, but also it affects so much of our behavior and how we react towards people.
And that healing, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think first of all, tuning into your own body and noticing and realizing that we all have wisdom from different parts, from the head, from the heart, from the body, which is experiences, right? We can access all these different forms and sources and not think that I only get my wisdom and my knowledge from books. It comes from all kinds of sources. And that in itself is a good validation for your own self to realize that I don't have a problem. So that's when I realized I did not really have a problem. It's just how I did not access what I had, right? So,
and that quick reframe, right? We try not to use the word problem, but I have a small issue or I have a slight challenge, right? And so the words you use on yourself, the language that you choose to use, right? Yeah. Otherwise, many times I think people end up going into victim mode or self-pity. And, when you wallow in self-pity, which I know I did at some point, it's very hard to pull yourself out from there.
That's true. Well, thanks so much for sharing your experience as well, because it hopefully it shows our viewers that, we may look normal. At least I think we look quite normal.
I think we look normal. Thank you so much.
And yet, we could have all kinds of stuff, right? Cindy just shared so much about what has happened to her, and look who she has become, right? Successful trainer, training image, giving advice to tons of people, students, yourself, training tons of executives and leaders, and myself having major challenges in school, and yet we are able to do what we can. So everybody is capable of being who they want to be when they start believing themselves.
Exactly. And of course, that's why we do what we do at EQ World, our EQ programs that we offer, whether it's a 2-day workshop, it's not just about corporate classes, right? We also do offer this to the public. We have different levels. We have executives, we have leadership programs. And of course, especially over this period of the pandemic, being able to talk about resilience, being able to teach people how to build themselves up from within. That has been something that's been so important, So I think if people are interested to find out more, they can always go to our website at www.eqworld.com, or just drop you or myself a message, and then let's see how we can move forward with this, because you and I do a lot of coaching. We also do our hotlines, to support people with the volunteer work that we do. Yeah.
Right.
Is there anything that you want to add on? I think, let me just look at the questions. You can add anything.
Right. So yeah, maybe while you're looking at the questions, I'd just like to summarize what Cindy was also sharing with us, right? In terms of her addiction, right? Her addiction. So one of the things she said was to recognize that there's a problem, right? Recognize there's a problem they're struggling with. Go and get help. Now, the thing is, in her case, right, she had a mother by her side on the phone, at least. And what about those who don't have that opportunity? Once you recognize it, just either give a call or speak. The beginning point is speaking to someone about it, because you never know what they're going to say. The other one I wanted to add just now is, in case you do tell it to someone and then you tell it to the wrong person, like the person starts saying, "Hi, I knew it. I could see it in you." That's when sometimes we get so disillusioned. We want to shut them down and don't want to approach anyone else. Remember, don't give up. It could have been the wrong person first time round. Try the second, try the third, try the fourth, especially when you know you need help. No man's an island. There are really good people out there. And of course, you meet some wrong people.
And there's us, of course. I mean, we've managed our hotline. I've been doing that over COVID period. Okay, so while you're talking about that, let me just read something here from Timothy Ho. Feelings. are difficult to manage, to recognize and to demonstrate empathy with others' feelings shows up on your own. That's being vulnerable. And, I think this is where sometimes, yeah, I do love the comment too. And empathy is something that we did talk about in one of our other sessions. It's something that, it's such an important component of emotional intelligence. And again, remember, we can learn these skills. They're not something that you might feel like I'm not born with it. It's okay. If you don't feel like you're born with it, you can learn it. And again, that's why it's so important to just be aware of where you're at and know that don't give up on yourself, just there is always the potential to grow. And I totally believe that everybody has the solution within them. They just need to dig a little bit deeper.
That's right. And don't give up, because you never know who you're going to meet. And I like one comment which Cindy made, and that is she had a push factor, and that was because she knew her hips were giving way. Sometimes we don't have to wait till that push factor. In her case, there was that situation. But knowing the consequences of you carrying on what you're doing and where it could lead, keep thinking about that. And the other one is think of the pull factor, who you could be without whatever you're going through, right? These are two important areas I think we should think about often enough to push us
totally agree.
out of it.
Yeah.
All right.
1
hour, and we have to say goodbye. First of all,
the time has totally buzzed by.
Bye. First of all, thanks a lot, Cindy, for being with us. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Cindy.
Your story, and of course, being with you, Marion, and sharing your story, and all our viewers out there. We will definitely reply to your comments. We wish more time. Maybe one day we can have 1.5 hours. You never know.
Exactly. So a big shout out to all the viewers. Thank you so much for all your comments, all your likes. We took a break last week. We'll be on next week, so we're not taking another break. But with the long weekend coming up, please stay safe, wear your mask, look after each other, take care. And we look forward to meeting you next week.
That's right.
So with that,
thank you very much, and see you next week.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Good night.